Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. Duane the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself walking along random, natural environmental settings, though somewhat gloomy, the sky is overcast, and I would be accompanied by another individual that appeared human, and we seemed to be marking and following the progress of a body form resembling loosely a raptor, the dinosaurs as made famous and globally familiar through the Jurassic Park movies. Impressions revealed that this raptor form was actually myself. What was a body type as affected from my consciousness from a lifetime long ago, and that this third-person perspective view, observing what would be then one of my previous lifetime body forms, was in actuality a view from my real awareness, true self position, and the individual accompanying me, the human, was in reality a real guide, also operating from this aside from the simulation, my lifetime as a raptor, real awareness, is this everything position. For it is so that as real awareness selects a simulator, so to speak, it embodies the ideas that effect as the simulator selected as a consciousness. The consciousness affects body forms which have the mechanics to decode these ideas into the simulation of the multi-dimensional layout of the simulator, and now the real awareness has the view as afforded through the body forms of that which are creational realm unrealities. The foundation of their generation are the ideas or files that render them as made possible through the body mechanics. A little like a computer operator observing the computer game as made possible to be experienced through the eyes of the game avatar being played, presented on the screen as graphics. The whole purpose of the simulators is to present that which the isness isn't, for the isness has the singular imperative to continuously recognize its own endlessness. This is achieved through being able to determine itself from a position that it isn't. that as the isness is everything, so the recognizing of everything is made possible through a comparison to that which is a something. For the simulators afford the means by which parts and pieces of this everything can be isolated as ideas, and consciousness embedded and experienced through the body forms as positions of segregated and isolated somethings from the isness, everything true reality. And so, that which is a part of the real awareness units take on a particular simulator, the ideas as a consciousness that effect it, and as the difference between the two positions is recognized, the ideas of creation in relation to this everything so then this affords the real awareness recognition of the it is a part of, which becomes greater recognition the has of its own endlessness. But even as the real awareness views through the body forms the simulated situations of the creational positions, it still maintains the everything position, the nowness of its reality, and is now closer to then recognizing the isness. Necessary is it to not only operate in creation through body forms, but to establish greater immersion into that which is unreal and simulated, rather than just maintaining the indifferent, objective, real awareness view. For as we process through creation, we assume innumerable insect and animal body types, and although all will be operating from a consciousness program that dictates their mannerisms and species behavior, we still are retained as the real awareness indifferent view of that which is being revealed through the body forms, the various environments and situations our body forms are operating within. A certain body form will come to be where the ability to free will generate ideas via the body vehicles, the thoughts and emotions, becomes so that as we create the ideas, we are momentarily removed from the nowness of our real awareness isness position, from being the computer operator, the gamer, to being that which we are animating, the body forms, the avatars operating in the game arena. This then affords a comparison between the nowness, everything is, real awareness position, and what is now a secondary self, as established, and that we operate as when we do wield free will and create the ideas that we do, or agree to the ideas as created by others. What happens then is the free will idea formulating is overindulged, the secondary personal self becomes more so, and the real awareness, that which we actually are, disregarded and over lifetimes forgotten, and now we are operating solely as the personal self. The game avatar now thinks it is real, whereas in reality it is a creation for the singular purpose of facilitating the means by which the real awareness can recognize the isness that it is, from the comparison as provided by it, a tool then that allows the real awareness to see itself from a position other than the everything reality that it is. The computer operator, the real awareness symbolically, must sit back as its game avatar takes on a life of its own, and free will dictates its direction, experiences, and lifetimes based on what the creation decides. But eventually comes the point where the real awareness, re-establishes connection with its creation and attempts to bring it on board with the real purpose of its recognition. That the personal self-intent, which had been for the longest time that which effect manifested the various thrills that were the personal self's indulgences, to now aligning the personal intent with the real intent, that being the real awareness's imperative for its recognition. As I said, I was operating from this real awareness position, the computer operator, and viewing then objectively one of my body form creations, an animal form resembling the dinosaur raptor, directly animating it, a form prior to the emergence of the secondary personal self. But as impressions revealed, this was in fact the last form my real awareness would be directly animating, that as this lifetime ended and the body form expired, what would follow would be body types where free will was to be utilized, and the secondary personal self come to the fore. The human accompanying me was a real guide, as I said, and he would be communicating to my real awareness via impressions from the reality of the isness we both operated within. Though a reality my real awareness was yet to recognize, the sense of a preparation for what would be a long series of lifetimes, where immersion into the personal self would be so, where the creation took on a life of its own and would remain in a disassociation from that which actually animates it, the real awareness. The life of myself as a kind of raptor would come to an abrupt end, for as a male so would its programmed species inclination be to mate, and it would do so with a female of its kind. As it transpired, this species of raptor-like reptiles boasted females twice the size of the males, and when the mating was complete, the female would elect to kill the male. My final body form, directly animated by real awareness, was destroyed, the awareness vacating its form. The scene now would be of my featuring in a building or other that represented the consciousness, the guide still present, and it was as though together the real awareness that I was viewing from the perspective of, that was animating through and therefore inside the consciousness representing a building, and the guide were making adjustments of a kind to the interior of the house. Consciousness alterations that would effect as the corresponding body form I next would assume as having the capacity where free will was granted and to be utilized, and the secondary personal self would be established. The sense was of abandoning what we were doing, my real awareness and the guide, as though the realization that through this secondary personal self becoming so, with the inevitable lifetimes of real awareness disconnect this would entail, so the real awareness, the guides, the isness, could only step back and watch as the creation went through its array of self-decided lifetimes until a connection could be at some later stage re-established with it, and to bring it aboard the real purpose of its recognition. For now, I would find myself in a kind of classroom setting, operating already as the secondary disconnected from real awareness, personal self-view and position, even though my first lifetime as a body form, where free will was to be made available and the personal self be conceived, was yet to be made manifest physical level-wise. I would be in the company, of a number of other individuals, and present also would be a very sinister and ill-intended female character in the capacity as a kind of teacher. What seems to happen is that as real awareness initially chooses a simulator, not only is the simulator overall multi-dimensional template taken on as ideas that formulate as a consciousness, the simulator of choice uploaded and ready to operate through, but a certain additional package of ideas is installed that effected will be our first ever body forms. And according to this karmic initial package, so will all body forms, as directly animated by real awareness, automatically process from one to the other, a progression that doesn't require conscious intent or agreement to have a rollout, as the real awareness always is operating as the nowness everything of its reality, applying no intent, thought, or emotion in addition to the everything that it is. And so, different karmic packages effect different sequences of body form progression, generally consisting of two broad categories, the predators and the prey lines. That the form I would operate as just prior to my subsequent lifetime, where the secondary personal self would be established, would be a carnivorous, indicated my karmic package as installed in consciousness where my simulator process began, was that which would effect body forms more so along the predatory lines. And it is the predators then that tend to give rise to the free will wielding body types that have this consciousness inclination retained, that of predating on others, which expresses as the more abrasive drives that of domination, subjugation, etc. The predatory animal lines give rise to what generally become the predatory secondary personal self-species, the controlling reptilians and associated dominating body types. For indeed, this ill-intended female teacher was as though schooling those present in the ways of domination, broadly speaking, as though this consciousness inclination had effected the means by which this could be continued and developed as the secondary personal selves then came to the fore, and through this counselling and idea installation to the consciousness of all those present, so what would manifest would be the more aggressively inclined individuals and species establishing themselves in the simulator. And present also would be the same real guide as impressions revealed that had been featuring up until this point, as though maintaining his watch over myself. For indeed, the guides stand with the real awarenesses of all, as they operate in the same isness reality, irrespective of the real awareness being aware of them and able to recognize them or not. The guides move throughout creation unseen, waiting for the moment and opportunity to facilitate every personal self's reconnection with the real awareness they actually are. I would, however, not exactly rebel against what the ill-intended teacher was preparing us for. All the individuals in the room and myself set to be the dominating simulator characters in the various capacities we would be, but at the time I felt somewhat limited in the roles I would assume, as though ill-intended and abrasively driven, yes, but rather restricted in the extent by which I could be so, and I would become disruptive, refuse to cooperate, and formulate my consciousness with the ideas that would have my ill-intended position somewhat limited, I would assault the very ill-intended teacher female conducting the class, and rather choose to then operate in ill-intended capacities, but according to what I decided, not to be regulated or pigeonholed according to the dictates of what was very likely an already established controlling simulator system, though at this stage, very early on, literally speaking, in my lifetimes, a simulator control system in its infancy. I would have the view now of further adjustments being made to my consciousness representing a building accordingly, and manifested would be the means and circumstances in reflective cause and effect measure by where I established myself as a kind of a powerful, demonic, godlike character. As everything is based on agreement as to every individual's respective experiences, as powerful as my body type may be, and whatever capabilities it has as developed through the consciousness, for me to impact others adversely, so they must agree that this can be so. This then becomes an idea as installed in their consciousness, and now potentially will this be the experience as shared between us, where I can impose destructively on their body form and situation. For absent of the idea that I can, then despite my best efforts I will be unable, as a simulation as shared between individuals is dependent on the agreement as is present in relation between them. To have become such a powerful creational character by whatever means and mechanisms I had trawled extensive agreement throughout multi-dimensional creation that facilitated my ability to express this power over the simulator masses, that I had established myself as the equivalent of, say, a life-level reptilian god, but in the long ago distant so-called past, or perhaps more so as one of these ancient ones, these powerful, ill-intended gods of old I have encountered and shared my real side experiences in relation to over the years. There came a point, however, where my lofty, destructive, and abrasive over the simulator masses position would come to a conclusion. The compulsion and intent to retain such a status was maintained, but as though I would be challenged for my position by another budding simulator tyrant that was establishing himself. It seems this character was better adept at cultivating agreement, which not only matched that which maintained my tyrannical position, but which allowed him to surpass me and indeed displace me, and where, as my dominion lay in ruins, I would have a final confrontation with what would be effectively my replacement. One powerful demon godlike character claiming the spot of another. I can't say for certain as to his identity, but his form would be completely clad in black armor and robes, and whoever he was set to emerge as another creationally powerful, self-proclaimed god, with the simulator agreement to back up his position. And wherever we were located, a scene of fire and smouldering mountains as the backdrop, before he would smite me and destroy my body form, I would proclaim how come would the day where I would encounter and confront him again, as though an intuitive knowing of the process of creation, that being an eventual facing of every idea of consciousness that had affected our every experience, lifetime, and indeed interaction with every body form we ever have had association with. For it is the ideas that affect our experiential simulated situations, and in relation to those featuring within them, ideas that will be retained in consciousness, a consciousness we fully embrace as to its idea entirety as we operate as the secondary personal self, that eventually every idea that the consciousness comprises of, we will have to face and decide as to its release, which translates as we all indeed having to encounter every individual we ever had idea affecting association with, when and if we embark on such a process, that we can be extricated from the necessity of the simulators. That although I no longer would operate in the lofty power position I had, as a self-proclaimed and agreement-enforced malevolent god of a kind, my overall consciousness design and proclivity was inclined and designed toward that of destruction and suppression of others, etc. And although through the subsequent body forms and creational positions I occupied, I would never have the same extent and range of abrasive impact I had as this demonic god, I still would operate in ill-intended capacities overwhelmingly, assuming all manner of body forms, demonic, reptilian, etc., in reflective accord with the consciousness design, and a number of real side experiences have I been shown and shared where I was as these twisted body types, and carrying out the general skullduggery and dark force affiliated debauchery that I indulged in for so many lifetimes. To get from this overall general state of affairs, that of operating in abrasive and destructive ways, to my current position, that of a human body type, and on my process of awareness and is recognition, evidently there must have been a turning point, where I began to alleviate the distortion and destructive inclination and compulsion that my programmed consciousness comprised of, that had always affected as equally my being dismally creationally positioned and occupying distortion of a body form. For at a certain point the same guide would be featuring in what would be my experiential presence again, during my various ill-intended and operating lifetimes, and would manage to get through to the personal self as to the nature of my consciousness, and how I always will be retained as its effects in equal reflected measure, that such a destructive consciousness will eventually have me facing my own mirrored destruction, as everything equals itself, and when a karma is due, so we may even find ourselves phantom zone placed accordingly as just one potentiality. It was as though at the time I couldn't quite recognize what the guide was conveying, that from my warped personal self-perspective I was simply amusing and keeping myself entertained in creation at the expense of others as my chosen thrill and sensation, and seemed incapable of remorse or empathy in regards to those I harmed or destroyed. The guide would reveal a large symbol-covered vase, as though it represented the essence of the distortion that was my consciousness. I would destroy it, and within was a small wooden figurine, and as I held it in my hands, I would receive as though a program download of the extent of my abrasiveness of consciousness design, and this was somewhat of an eye-opener. That unconscious as most beings are, as they really are operating on automatic pilot, according to the design of their consciousness, as though at the mercy of compulsions, desires, and patterns of behavior that are driven from the consciousness construct. So generally the personal self has a difficulty where objective regarding of itself is concerned. As we justify our actions and deeds as we will, etc., we literally can't see the measure of our own distortion. Despite this guide provided revelation, I would have another lifetime, among others, of a continuous abrasive nature as a female, reptilian in appearance, and it seemed my position in regards to the dark force circles I operated within was diminished in status yet again. Despite this, I would be attempting to improve my circumstances by appeasing and seeking approval through my dastardly actions and deeds in every way I could from another dark force orientated character of extreme standing and ill-intended prominence. At one point I was to undertake an assignment on his behalf that visually presented as my needing to retrieve some item of significance or value that would prove to be very instrumental in regards to its ill-intended controlling application. And if I delivered this item, so I would be elevated in my standing within the dark force control systems and structures of the simulator, and in reflective accordance my form would change. That although retained as a female and reptilian, green-scaled, tailed, and with the lizard-like head and protruding snout, etc., in addition, so would my body form sprout spines along the back, shoulders, and so forth that seemed to glow, as though having a luminescent quality. I would spend my time seeking this item, which proved hard to acquire, no details afforded as to the specifics regarding it, only that it was set to be utilized for controlling purposes, as I said. At one point, however, another female, occupying a position as the right-hand man or woman of this powerful dark force character, harboring disdain for me and concerned as to the maintenance of her own position should I complete my assignment and maybe supplant her, so she would hatch a plot that would have me dishonored in the eyes of the powerful and influential dark force being. They both would confront me and inform me that my position now was tentative, turning their backs on me and walking off, the other female sneering at me over her shoulder. My item seeking a quest to regain the dark being's approval would have me involving myself with a certain expression of a body form, that of bipedal, animal-like forms, a variety of a body type I have experienced on many previous real-side experiences, and shared my encounters and interactions in regards to the wolf, feline, avian body forms, etc. Generally, these body forms tend to be more benevolently inclined, consciousnesses less abrasive than, say, the reptilian, insectoid species, and so forth, that as we associate with others, as we forge agreement with them that effects as our ability to share experience, for to feature in the presence of another the idea of myself, my body form, must be installed in their consciousness, that I can be affected into their experiential midst, so experience shared will equate to consciousness meshing, that as I agree with another, I agree with their consciousness design, and it is uploaded, so to speak, into my own consciousness. That affected is not only their body type into my experience, but the nature of their consciousness intentionality becomes as the form our shared experience will take. The dynamics that can be potentially played out between myself and those I have extended agreement to. If I agree to an individual whose consciousness is of a dominating proclivity, this I will experience in relation to them, that of being dominated by them within the parameters and specifics the agreement allows. As these body forms were more benevolently inclined, as I said, the feline, avian, animal, bipedal types, those where the secondary self also had been established, their general consciousness design would mesh with my own, and somewhat soften my consciousness, which, as I said, had been destructive of design for the longest time. That even though, as I engaged with these body forms, as necessary was it in regards to my artifact or item securing a mission, consciously I wouldn't realize the distortion of my own consciousness becoming lessened as a result. And at a certain point, this rather affected as my inability to operate within the dark force circles to the extent that I always had, as a consciousness design always affects a circumstance, creational positioning, and the type of body form associations that feature within them. And in the experience, so a warning sign would come into a manifestation, declaring in flashing red letters that to attempt to proceed to operate with the dark forces, and I would very likely be destroyed. My position with them forfeited, losing favour with the dark being I was working on behalf of, and all other dark force expression of a body type additionally. At that moment, so would this be somewhat of a dismaying situation for myself. Having operated in dark force and affiliated capacities for so many lifetimes, but in actuality this was the turning point. My association with the more life-supporting body types, the bipedal felines and so forth, had reordered my consciousness that it was less distorted, and effected now would be a series of lifetimes where progressively I would be less inclined and motivated to act destructively, scorned by the dark forces in all their expressions generally, and my body forms in the lifetimes that followed, expressing this consciousness change. For I would be as these very expressions of body forms I had made contact with in my lifetime as the female reptilian. I would have a series of lifetimes as bipedal cats, wolves, etc. The real side experience glimpses of such past lifetimes I also have had revealed and shared on previous real side experiences. My consciousness would continue to mellow, so to speak. My reflected body forms and creational positioning would be in equal accordance, and ultimately I would find myself as human in the current lifetime position on the earth. And undoubtedly the guides had been watching throughout, as they do with all in the simulators, and my real awareness would make contact and reconnect with my personal self in this lifetime, and my process of awareness would begin, as I would embrace the real purpose, aligning my personal intent with the real awareness, real intent of ears recognition. For it does seem that the ears affords these karmic initial simulator insertion packages that will present as the two broad categories, that of the predator, suppressor, and dominator, and that of the prey, the suppressed and dominated. That this presents then as a simulators where the controller and slave dynamic becomes prevalent, but that affords the greatest comparison by which the ears can be recognized. For the more distorted is the overall consciousness and that which is effected from it, a simulator becoming increasingly aberrant and spiraling into reflective demise and eventual implosion, so is not only the incentive then for creational extrication, but the greater the distortion, the greater the comparison creation presents as, in relation to the true reality, in its pure isness actuality, that more likely can the difference, when the effort is made to compare them, be discerned and the ears recognized. That to compare two varieties of apple, for example, may not afford realization of how they differ, but should the comparison be between an orange and an apple, so more likely will the recognition of the difference be determined. And in the final analysis, despite how we have programmed and developed the consciousness, regardless of our life choices and actions, and the body forms we have assumed, no matter how abrasive or destructive we have been, animating through it all will be this same real awareness with the same overall objective, that of recognizing the ears it is a part of, as my own journey through a creation that I have touched upon here and had revealed to me on the real side would testify to.
Okay, Kevin, boy, that's a whole lot. And I suggest that you contact Netflix and send them some of this stuff because it's very, very good, very explanatory, specific, etc. And they're always looking for new ideas. And so, no, this is just terrific. I just happened to see a little clip of a scary movie the other day. And this guy looks like he was a relative of the Joker or somebody like that. Simply said that, oh, there are two types of people, those who kill and those who get killed. And so again, yes, we're in creation here. We're facing it. This is the big wake up. And again, this is why there's very few of us here, because it gets scarier and scarier. So people run away and they start their own little ideas, thinking that they're safe with their God ideas or their spiritual ideas, etc. But getting to be very, very real, that's a huge step. And yes, the real guides, they're the overseers, and watching, who does what and who's willing to go through whatever to finally recognize. It's all in the recognition of what's real. And having that intent there, very, very important. And so again, we went through the babysitting pass and whatever, and it seems just so, it just seems so right because, again, it applies to the personal self only and not the real awareness. And so just like Paul had stated, the idea was that, oh, we all have a soul. And then when Paul came along, he said, you are soul. But still, he didn't define it. And so again, people have another piece of information, but not the realization and recognition they need to see what is truly real. And so this is the big part. And look what you got to go through. And so it's worth it to take the time to learn to recognize what's more real than anything in creation. Otherwise, we go through all this funny stuff. Here's Jeremy, Kevin, whatever. And yeah, we go through it while we're here, have to deal with it. And this is why I constantly suggest, being like the sun, learn to recognize what's real, because look at what we've gone through to get here. And we don't need to go through any of this stuff anymore because it's all about recognition and that intent, having that intent and that recognition to be what's real with what all life is. But we need to recognize that too, so that we can properly, you might say, operate and have a real position. So this becomes the fun part. So in the meantime, there's a lot of this adventure, and yes, I suggest that you contact, even CBS and NBC or whatever, the Far Out Kids there, whatever. But your stuff is so very good, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing.